Okay, good afternoon, students. Let me begin today's class with this PowerPoint presentation, as I feel that it would always be convenient for you if you have a slide presentation. And as I have already told that this is the last class on Dr. Ambedkar's speech at Mahad, and I have also discussed it in my previous lecture, the entire issue of untouchability and how it had been described as the greatest evil of Hindu society by Dr. Ambedkar. And we stopped our discussion up to a point when Dr. Ambedkar categorically stated that in this struggle for the annihilation of caste system and a total removal of untouchability, no other caste would help the untouchables to achieve this success. In fact, in order to attain this objective of a casteless society and a society where untouchability is completely removed, the untouchable caste, the Dalits, will have to fight it out for themselves. And Dr. Ambedkar already discussed why other upper castes would never help the Atishudras or the untouchables in this struggle, because each and every caste has its concern and anxiety about maintaining its own status quo, its present position in society. So, no other castes would take the risk of helping the lowest caste, the Atishudras, and thereby develop any chance of demotion or degeneration in the caste-based hierarchy of Hindu society. So it is the struggle of the people of the lowest caste, the Atishudras, the untouchables, the Dalits, to take up this revolutionary cause. They have to unite, educate, and agitate for the sake of achieving the goal of a casteless society without the evil of untouchability. Now, as you know, in the next slide, just look at a minute, just wait. As you know that there had been a general taboo in the Indian society, particularly at the turn of the century, in the first years of the 20th century, there had been a taboo on the untouchable castes in joining the different jobs available under this scheme. So, untouchables in the Indian army. In fact, earlier in the 19th century, Dr. Ambedkar and actually his predecessors, the Mahads in general, were recruited in the Indian army. There was also a Mahad regiment in the Indian army. And interestingly, this Mahad regiment also ensured a development in the local economy, because such untouchable people were regularly employed in army. They were recruited as soldiers. So there was less poverty in the region where the Mahad community stayed in certain areas of Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. But later what happened that at the beginning of the 20th century, these untouchable castes were not allowed to join the Indian army. Why? Because the upper caste, mostly Brahminical people, were unwilling to allow the untouchables to join the Indian army. Now that created a huge crisis in the local economy. In fact, if you follow the biography of Dr. Ambedkar, you will find that his father had also been an army officer. He had been a Subedar in Indian army, and his forefathers were also regular recruits in the Indian army. So they had a privileged position during the rule of the British East India Company, and later when the British government took over fully, they were also recruited in the Indian army. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the 20th century, this practice was discontinued, and we find that other lower castes, that is Shudras, were also employed in the army, police, courts, and other offices, government offices, but not the Ati Shudras. The Dalits, the untouchables, were the only community who were excluded from joining these government jobs. So you find Dr. Ambedkar explains how the upper caste conspired deliberately against the Ati Shudras to make them poor and socially marginalized. And by excluding them from joining the army, it also happened that they lost their position of prestige and esteem in Indian society. They were deliberately put in a state of insult and humiliation. And that was the plight of the untouchables at the beginning of the 20th century. Next, look how Dr. Ambedkar says, in fact, you would find it in the text. Dr. Ambedkar says that the British government was powerless. Why? The law was equal. The law didn't discriminate between one untouchable and another touchable joining the British army or other government jobs. The law was perfectly equal. But it was the problem of the Varna Hindus who exercised their power and influence, their pernicious influence upon the government, and forced the British government not to employ the untouchables in government jobs. And you'd be surprised to find that there were many upper caste Congress leaders, many Brahmins in the Congress who didn't want the people like Ambedkar joining the government jobs. And in this context, I would like to refer to another anthology where you would also find some very significant Dalit texts, which you would find one such text is by Ayan Kali, a great Malayalam peasant Dalit leader in the late 19th century. Ayan Kali was probably the first major Dalit crusader against the caste-based system of discrimination. In fact, in Kerala, what happened that the British government promulgated a law whereby the practice of untouchability was clearly banned. And there was another circular in which the untouchable children were allowed to join the schools and academic institutions. Unfortunately, what happened that the upper caste people didn't allow the British government to implement this law. And as a result of that, what happened, despite the legal provisions being available, the untouchable children could not go to school and could not receive education for a substantial period of time. So we find that the laws were equal, but there was great problem in implementing the legal provisions, as the upper caste Varna Hindus were always against the emancipation or equal treatment of the untouchables. Next slide you follow here, how Dr. Ambedkar says that there was the policy of exclusion, systematic exclusion of the untouchables in trade and commerce. The untouchables cannot do any business. Dr. Ambedkar says they cannot join any trade. It is not merely because they are poor. No, it is mainly because no one will accept goods from them. That is a very important issue. No, an untouchable businessman would not be able to sell his or her goods. Why? Because people, the buyers, will not accept goods from them. So once again, the discourse of untouchability was operating at the heart of the miserable plight of the untouchables. The economic disempowerment and deprivation was also largely caused by the system of untouchability. And herein lies the difference between Marx and Ambedkar. The followers of Marx insisted on the existence of class. Class was the only marker of discrimination to the Marxists. But for the Ambedkarites, class was not the only marker of discrimination. Caste in the Indian context was even a more powerful marker, a more powerful category of discrimination. So the caste class binary was very important in the Indian context. Why? Because in the Indian context, even a rich Dalit will not be accepted by the mainstream society because of his untouchable status. He may be rich, but he will still be excluded from the mainstream of society. So caste is a major concern in the Indian context. And look how Dr. Ambedkar consistently advocates and expresses his concern that Hindu society is in crisis. Remember one thing, when Dr. Ambedkar delivers this lecture, it was in December 1927. At that point of time, Dr. Ambedkar was very much a member of Hindu society. He had not been converted to Buddhism. No, it happened much later in his life in 1956. So, Dr. Ambedkar was still very much a Hindu. He was a Dalit, an untouchable, but at the same time, he considered himself still as a Hindu. And interestingly, you should also know that the surname Ambedkar was given to him by his Brahmin teacher. It was not his real surname. No, it was given to him. He had a surname which was typical of the Mahad untouchable caste. And later what happened, when he received that surname in school, he could move on to Mumbai and he could get admission to the prestigious Elphinstone School. Elphinstone School and later to college, and he studied in Mumbai University, and after that you know that he moved to Columbia University and did his PhD in economics, and he went there under a fellowship offered by the Maharaja of Baroda. There was a trust maintained by the Maharaja Swaji Rao of Baroda, which actually offered him a fellowship for his distinguished result, and he moved on to Columbia University. Later, he also moved to London School of Economics. He had another PhD, in economics from the London School of Economics. So, Dr. Ambedkar was a very distinguished scholar, but at the same time, he experienced the evil of untouchability. He experienced the humiliation and trauma of exclusion in his personal life. Despite being a great scholar, he had to experience many such humiliating situations and treatments. So Dr. Ambedkar says, look at his main argument. This is very important. Hindu society promotes division through the practice of untouchability. He says that Hindu society promotes division. Okay, so the society loves to be divided through the practice of untouchability. And that is why he says that the moral order of Hindu society is very weak. Moral order. Why? Why is the moral order weak? Because it promotes and encourages discrimination, division. And he also argues that Hindu society, as a result, is defeated by other progressive societies. Why? Why is it defeated? Because it is divided. Okay, all of us know that famous proverb, united we stand, divided we fall. Okay. So, the main reason, according to Dr. Ambedkar, for the fall of Hindu society was what? Its practice of untouchability, practice of discrimination, practice of division. Okay. So Hindu society is defeated by other progressive societies. So this is definitely a very important observation. And how to overcome this situation? How to overcome this situation? Look at Dr. Ambedkar's prescription. He suggests the existence of a single caste system. There should be only one caste. Remember, there may be a kind of confusion. Okay, when we look at Dr. Ambedkar's prescription of single caste system in this lecture, Speech at Mahad, and when we read another essay by Dr. Ambedkar, Annihilation of Caste, okay, there may be a confusion. What is that confusion? That is Dr. Ambedkar then advocating the single caste system, or is he advocating the absence of any caste system? That is a big question. Annihilation of caste means annihilation of the caste system, that there should be no caste system. But in the speech at Mahad, look, Dr. Ambedkar says that there should be a single caste system. Single caste system. So how do you reconcile this apparent contradiction, or rather apparent confusion? Do you find any confusion here? I would like to have your opinion. Would you like to comment on this, apparent confusion? In one lecture, he says, okay, caste system should be annihilated. And in this speech, he suggests that there should be a single caste system. Why does he say these two apparently different things? Why? Any idea? Any opinion? Any comment? Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me? Any comment? Any observation? Shumana, can you hear me? Shumana, can you hear me? Somnath, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
What is your take on this apparent confusion? Annihilation of caste on the one hand, single caste system on the other. How do you look at it? Is there any contradiction? Annihilation of
Yeah,
caste
obvious.
and single caste system? Obviously. Hmm.
Yeah,
There is a
there is a
contradiction.
difference between two.
Uh,
Yeah.
yes. So annihilation of caste is a more radical prescription, is it? Is it so? Annihilation of caste is a more revolutionary prescription, is it so? Do you think so,
Yes,
Somnath?
yes, sir.
Yes, yes,
Sir, it's revolutionary.
yes. Huh?
Yes, it's a it's a it's a revolutionary thing. What he says in his first previous lecture.
Huh. So
Annihilation of caste
annihilation
system.
of caste is a more revolutionary stance. Yes. But here,
I think
single caste system. Yes, I think. Tell me. Yes.
uh, I think two different things. But previously he was
Hmm.
uh, commenting on caste in revolution. In
Hmm. Hmm.
actually in terms of revolution
Hmm.
to avoid the actually
Hmm.
to avoid the system what is
Hmm.
presented before him.
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Now now what he learns that it's quite different, not quite different, but
No, actually, I tell you that these two observations were made in two different points of time in Dr. Ambedkar's life. Okay, when in December 1927, he suggests the replacement of the four caste system by the single caste system. Okay, he was still hopeful of
yes,
developing a kind of consensus among the Hindus regarding the evolution of a single caste identity. Okay, so this was actually an earlier stance. But
I think yes. I think that the
yes, tell me.
may I,
Ah,
may I speak? Okay.
ah,
So at the beginning, he thought that there is the chance, there is the possibility to make the people in a single shade.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Due to which he was talking about the single caste system. But later,
exactly.
when he
Hmm.
thought that it's not possible to
Hmm. Hmm.
let the people
Hmm.
come in a single shade or a unity,
Yes.
he put a jihad against the caste
Hmm.
system. So he
Hmm.
opining that
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
the truth to annihilate the absolute caste system.
Exactly. So this is, you are correct. You are correct. This is a later
Thank
development. Annihilation of caste is a later development. As it happened in the
yes,
case of W.B. Yeats. What happened? W.B. Yeats initially attempted to unite the Catholics and Protestants of Ireland, and he wanted to achieve unity of culture. Okay, unity of culture. But when he found that it was impossible to achieve unity of culture in Ireland, he gradually withdrew himself, isolated himself. Okay, and he was in a state known as Anglo-Irish solitude. So from the movement that is unity of culture to a state that is Anglo-Irish solitude, there was a great change in Yeats's philosophical stance, Yeats's political stance. Similarly, when Dr. Ambedkar talks about the single caste system in 1927, Dr. Ambedkar was still hopeful that there could be a consensus, there could be a unanimous decision among the Hindus to, to give away, to reject the four caste system and accept a single caste system. But later, what happened? Dr. Ambedkar realized that this idea of a single caste system was very idealistic. It was almost utopian. Why utopian? Because no, what will be the identity of that single caste? What will be the nomenclature of that single caste? What will be the name of the single caste? Okay, will it be Brahmin or Kshatriya or Vaishya or Shudra or Atishudra? What? So he realized that there could not be any consensus regarding the name of that single caste. And he also realized bitterly that these different castes would never come together and form a single caste. That is why during the 1930s, he gradually changed his stance. He became more radical and revolutionary. And he suggested that there should be a total annihilation of caste. Annihilation of caste. So this is to achieve social equality. What is to achieve social equality? Single caste system. Dr. Ambedkar prescribed that the single caste system is the only way to achieve social equality. And what does he mean by social equality? Social equality means equal distribution of privilege on the basis of merit. Very important question, I tell you. You should focus on this idea. This was Dr. Ambedkar's own observation. You will find it in this speech. Okay, today you will find a lot of controversy, okay, regarding the question of reservation. The policy of reservation. Okay, look how Dr. Ambedkar comments on this whole issue. He says that equal distribution of privilege on the basis of merit. And then he also continues, he adds here that equal distribution of privilege should not be based on birth, should not be based on wealth or other criteria. And he also criticizes people who rather ridicule the idea of social equality by developing the idea of natural inequality. Okay, Dr. Ambedkar refers to a kind of people, a group of people, okay, who did not approve the idea of social equality because they said that there was no equality in nature. There was no equality in nature. There is physical inequality. No two men are alike. Okay, no 5 fingers, okay, of our hand, they are alike. Okay. So there is inequality in nature. There is inequality in physical manifestation. So there cannot be any equality in society. Okay, this was the argument. But Dr. Ambedkar says, no, this is an excuse. This is not an argument. There may be inequality in nature, but that inequality in nature is for the sake of identification, for the sake of distinctiveness of species, for the sake of what? Spot identifying characteristics of an individual. That is, inequality in physical manifestation, inequality in nature is created for the sake of identifying or separating one individual from another. But social inequality is something which is unnatural. This is not created by nature. This is created by man. So Dr. Ambedkar says that social inequality is unnatural. And how can we achieve social equality? By equal distribution of privilege on the basis of merit, not on the basis of birth. Somebody's father was a sweeper. That doesn't mean that the son or the daughter would also have to sweep throughout his or her life. No. Okay, somebody had wealth. That does not mean that the son or the daughter would not work at all, sit idly and enjoy all the wealth. No. But there is one argument also proposed by Dr. Ambedkar. Look at the next slide, where he says that there should be time for developing the qualities. Very important. Equal opportunity to be given to people on the basis of merit. Okay, fine, fantastic. Okay, but there should be time. Time should be given for developing those qualities. To whom should time be given? Time should be given to the underprivileged section of society. Those who did not have any privilege in any ages, in any previous ages. they should be given some time. People with no privileges should be given opportunities to develop inherent qualities. And how does Dr. Ambedkar develop his argument? He says that slaves will remain slaves forever if they are treated unequally. Yes. Look, if I tell somebody, there were a few castes, and few tribes, especially in the British India, okay, who were described by British as criminal tribes. The British passed an infamous law in 1871, Criminal Tribes Act. And by passing that law, they blacklisted only a handful of tribal people. Okay, tribal groups like Lodha, Khedia. Okay, they were described as criminal tribes. Why? Why were they branded as criminal tribes? Because they were forest tribes and they resisted the British, okay, from invading the forest land. Okay, they resisted, they revolted. And as they revolted, they were branded as criminals. Otherwise, the British government was unable to contain them, to control them. So it was a controlling measure to call them criminal tribe. So if you put a stigma to a certain group of people and allow that social stigma to continue through generations, what will happen? That the particular group will never find any opportunity to develop their inherent qualities, to develop their merit. That is Dr. Ambedkar's argument. Slaves will remain slaves if they are treated unequally. Criminals will never learn the virtue if they are not given refuge by the virtuous castes. Dr. Ambedkar says that criminals will never change. They will never reform. They will never reform if they are not guided properly by the virtuous castes.
Right.
So, if the virtuous castes remain virtuous only for themselves, then Dr. Ambedkar says they are selfish people because they want to confine their virtues only to their group, to their clan, to their community. But if they are truly unselfish, if they are truly patriotic, then they should also help others, even criminals, to learn the value of virtuous life. So criminals will never learn virtue if not given refuge by the virtuous caste. And in this connection, I give examples of two people, great reformers. One, Buddha, and you know the story of Angulimal. Okay, you have read a few Dalit poems on Buddha and his story of Angulimal, how he transformed the life of that very cruel criminal, a dacoit, a person who used to kill people and cut off their fingers and used to create a garland of dead humans' fingers and wear the garland. He had such a macabre taste, an infernal villain. Such a person was completely transformed by Lord Buddha. And later, Dr. Ambedkar was so fascinated by the philosophy of the Buddha that he converted to Buddhism a little before his death. He was converted to Buddhism, and his conversion to Buddhism also led to a large scale migration to Buddhism by his followers. Many Dalits also converted to Buddhism. And I provide the second example. This is of Sada Lakshmi. Sada Lakshmi was the first Dalit woman minister of Andhra Pradesh. Okay, and Sada Lakshmi appointed Dalit priests in Hindu temples, in Andhra Pradesh. It was a revolutionary decision. You will find it in the biography of Sada Lakshmi. What happened that in Andhra Pradesh, in many temples, including the Tirupati Tirumala, you would find that in many temples there was no access given to the Dalit people. In fact, there was no question of appointing any Dalit person as priest. The Hindu temples were dominated by the Brahmin priests. But it was Sada Lakshmi who, for the first time, opened the profession of priesthood to the able and eligible Dalits. She appointed them to many temples, and that created a huge controversy. But Sada Lakshmi quoted Dr. Ambedkar. She said that Baba Saheb had already told that if we don't give opportunity to people, they would not get the chance to realize their inner potentials. So these people had true penchant, true liking for priesthood. So even if they are Dalits, I am offering them an opportunity to act as temple priests. So you find that how there is a discourse of social empowerment. In fact, the day 20th March 1927, on which Dr. Ambedkar collected water from the Chavadar lake at Mahad, along with a large number of his followers. That day, 20th March 1927, is still observed as Social Empowerment Day. Social Empowerment Day, because the drinking of the water of Chavadar lake was a symbolic act of the empowerment of the untouchables. It was a historic act which Dr. Ambedkar could accomplish successfully on that very day. So Sada Lakshmi was again a person who was following Dr. Ambedkar. Now once again I would like to return to Dr. Ambedkar's speech, the last section of Dr. Ambedkar's speech, where Dr. Ambedkar once again advocates the way to strengthen Hindu society. And what was that? One caste only and the principle of equality. And Dr. Ambedkar repeatedly says that it will strengthen both Hindu society and Indian national movement. Dr. Ambedkar says that the removal of untouchability is essential for national unity. Look how in this part of his speech, Dr. Ambedkar argues like a typical insider of Hinduism. He talks like a typical patriotic Hindu leader who wants to strengthen Hindu society with one caste system and the principle of equality. Now, why does Dr. Ambedkar repeatedly emphasize the need to develop one caste system and the principle of equality? Why? For the sake of the unification of Hindu society, number one, and also by extension for the sake of the unification of Indian national movement, to strengthen it. Now, why did he feel this need to harp on the development of national unity? Why? Because you should always remember, I had already mentioned it in my first introductory lecture, that many Dalit intellectuals, including Dr. Ambedkar, were generally considered as anti-Hindu and anti-national by the upper caste Brahminical leaders of Indian National Congress. Why were they regarded as anti-caste and anti-Hindu and particularly anti-national? Why? Because these Dalit leaders supported many reformist decisions of the British government. They particularly supported the decision of British government not to recognize the practice of untouchability, the system of untouchability. And the Dalits and tribals were also hugely benefited by the British reformist movements in the domain of education, healthcare, and other essential aspects of life. In fact, if you look at the history of the South Indian states, you will find that there was a large scale conversion to Christianity, especially amongst the Dalits and tribals, because Christian missionaries went to them with different offers, various offers of the basic amenities of life. Okay, they wanted to improve their condition, economic condition, their educational status, their social and religious practices. So from one point of view, the intervention made by the Christian missionaries were also beneficial to some extent to the Dalits. And that is why many Dalit intellectuals were not strictly anti-British. But if you look at the upper caste leaders, if you look at the Brahminical leaders of Indian National Congress, you would find that many of them emphasized the idea of developing a very strong anti-British stand. They also harped on the idea of developing only one identity, that of the Indians. There should not be any encouragement to discuss any other discontent and dissent among the Indian population, Indian people. But the Dalits could never accept this homogeneous branding of Indian population. The Dalits argued that their voice should also be heard in the greater national context. Dr. Ambedkar's argument was very simple. If you don't remove the discriminatory caste-based practices, if you don't seriously try to unite the Hindu society on the basis of equal opportunity to all sections of society, you would never be able to unite the Indians for a spirited and unified struggle against the British rule. So it was very simple argument for Dr. Ambedkar, but there were very few takers in the Indian National Congress of this argument. And look at the next slide, where Dr. Ambedkar gives a clarion call for a social revolution. Dr. Ambedkar considers the attempt to remove untouchability as a social revolution for equality. Removal of untouchability is a social revolution for equality. And who will undertake this revolution? Only the untouchables, only the Dalits, only the Ati Shudras. Why? Because no other caste is going to help them for the fear of losing their present social status. And the next one, look, whether the revolution, that is a very significant part of this revolution. Dr. Ambedkar categorically states that whether the revolution should remain peaceful or whether it should grow violent, no, everything depends on the upper caste Hindus. Everything depends on that. In this connection, I have also referred to that case of Ayankali, the first Malayalam Dalit peasant leader, reformist leader. What happened? I give you an example. You will find it in that anthology, Listen to the Flames, a collection of pan-Indian Dalit writings, texts and readings from Dalit literature. Listen to the Flames. The last chapter is on this Malayalam Dalit peasant leader, Ayankali, the final chapter. If you see the last chapter, read it, you will find that what happened when the British issued a law, when they finally formulated a law giving open access to the Dalit children to the schools of Kerala, particularly the Travancore state, because Kerala was then under Travancore state. When the British issued that order to admit Dalit children to the schools of that region, what happened? what happened, you will be surprised to know that one upper caste owner of a school, founder of a school, who only used to admit the upper caste children in his school, decided to burn down his own school building overnight. He actually burnt down the school building. Why? Because he got the information that the next morning the leader, Dalit leader Ayan Kali, would come to that school along with a number of Dalit children to get them admitted to that school. He will be coming with that order, government order. So the founder of the school was so scared of seeing his own school being polluted by the entrance of Ayan Kali and other Dalit children that he was desperate to burn down his own school building. So look how the upper caste was absolutely hostile and inimical to what? To any kind of social emancipatory gesture shown to the Dalit people, to the untouchables. So Dr. Ambedkar says that it is very difficult to maintain the peaceful nature of a revolution. It is very difficult to observe satyagraha in the social revolution to remove untouchability. It is very difficult to maintain and observe satyagraha if the upper caste does not accept the basic ideals of this revolution. If the upper caste people turn hostile, the Dalits would have no other option but to take up arms in self-defense. So you understand how Dr. Ambedkar, in a way, cautions the upper caste people not to indulge in violence. And this is the last paragraph of the speech. Look at the slide. Look at the slide, French National Assembly of 1789. In the final paragraph, Dr. Ambedkar defends spiritedly the French National Assembly of 1789. And look how Dr. Ambedkar blames the rulers of France for the unleashing of the reign of terror. He says that the common people, the revolutionary people, would never have resorted to violence if the rulers were not treacherous, if they had not secretly summoned foreign help to suppress the revolution. So look how Dr. Ambedkar says that a social revolution can remain peaceful if the influential people, the upper class or the upper caste, practices restraint. If they practice restraint. Otherwise, what happens? That people who are inspired by revolutionary ideas will never stop, will never get frightened by the high-handedness of the upper caste. In fact, you know that when Dr. Ambedkar visited the Chavadar Lake at Mahad in March 1927, first time, you know that the guards there, the security personnel, beat them up, and many of them were grievously injured. What happened? As a result of that, Dr. Ambedkar complained to the British police, and many of them were arrested and put behind the bar. So, Dr. Ambedkar clearly suggests that the nature of a people's revolution can only be decided by the people in power. The nature and course of the final destination of a people's revolution is determined by the people in power. If they adopt a policy of confrontation, it will lead to a bloody revolution. On the other hand, if they adopt a policy of dialogue, discussion, and acceptance, only then the revolution could be peaceful and silently successful. So, look at the basic ideas of Dr. Ambedkar in this speech, and I have also collected one poem by Arjun Dangle on Mahad Satyagraha. Now, can you read the lines? Are you able to follow the lines? Mahad,
Yes, sir.
Mahad
Sir.
Satyagraha Hath. I read the lines.
Yes, sir.
I read the lines. In the motionless alleys outside the village gates, you came and thundered. Everyone started, brushed of the dust, and woke up. You walked forward, holding flaming arm. All the merchants of darkness. Look how the poet describes the upper caste, the mafias, the goons. All the merchants of darkness were fear struck. You kept on walking with everyone following. You stopped at the bank of the pond and gave us life. Gave us life. So, water is a symbol of life. Water is a symbol of emancipation. Water is a symbol of the end of discrimination. So, water symbolizes many things to the untouchables. Water itself becomes a very powerful symbol of social revolution. Water becomes a very powerful symbol of social revolution. This is a poem by Arjun Dangle. Arjun Dangle, was a leading, Marathi Dalit poet. Arjun Dangle, and you have read some of the poems in his edited volume, Poisoned Bread. And last, I have collected this image, this photograph of Dr. Ambedkar along with his followers, drinking water from the Chavadar lake at Mahad. At Mahad, it happened first in March 1927. I mentioned the date, 20th March 1927, which was observed as Social Empowerment Day. Look at the picture, and I would also like to advise you to follow this link on the YouTube. Okay, you can follow this link on YouTube because you will find the videos of Dr. Ambedkar's procession there to the Chavadar Lake along with the followers, and some of the recorded speeches of Dr. Ambedkar. You will find it there. There are in fact 3 important videos. Anyway, so would you like to ask any question? I have finished the discussion of the text, Dr. Ambedkar's speech at Mahad, and I have already uploaded the lecture materials, the study materials on the website. It's available. Now, would you like to ask anything? Would you like to clarify on any issue, anything? Now it's open for discussion. Yes, anybody? Yes, Shumana, tell me.
I would like to ask what is the conflict between Gandhi and Ambedkar?
No, I can't hear you properly. You have to be a little louder. A little louder.
Sir, I want to ask that what is the main conflict between Ambedkar and Gandhi?
Ambedkar and? A contest between Ambedkar and? Please tell me.
Mahatma Gandhi.
Huh?
Mahatma Gandhi.
Would you just?
Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes.
Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi.
Mahatma Gandhi. Yes, yes. No, but I have already mentioned that that Mahatma Gandhi was against the abolition of the four caste system of Hinduism. In fact, Gandhiji was in favor of retaining the idea of Varnashram. But Dr. Ambedkar was against retaining the idea of Chaturvarna, the four caste system. Okay, Dr. Ambedkar's argument was quite simple. He said that it was not a division of labor, it was rather a division of laborers. So, in the name of division of labor, that is Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, there was actually a division of laborers. Why? Because the lowest section of Hindu society was continued, or rather was forced to continue their ignoble or ignominious position generation after generation. Dr. Ambedkar said that the most problematic part of the caste system of Hindu society was the continuation of humiliation and its relation to birth, that your father was a sweeper and you would also be forced to act as a sweeper. No, this is something which was absolutely unacceptable to Dr. Ambedkar. Whereas, Gandhiji also condemned the practice of untouchability. In fact, Gandhiji was against the practice of untouchability. That is why he gave a new name to the untouchables, Harijan, and he wanted to give the untouchables a kind of social dignity, social prestige. And Gandhiji was truly sympathetic towards the untouchables. But once again, Dr. Ambedkar felt that only sympathy for the untouchables is not enough. Is not enough for what? Is not enough to establish real equality in Hinduism, in Hindu society. If we want to establish real equality in Hindu society, we have to do away with the four caste system. We have to develop, what we have to ensure the removal of untouchability, one caste, and social equality. That is the basic difference between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Any other question or comment? Anybody else? Okay, so it's time to end the lecture then. Thank you for your patient hearing. And can you hear me? Hello, all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Now I tell you one thing. Yes, I think that we should now take a pause. We should now, in a way, we have concluded